Alright, fine. I saw a video on the internet that pissed me off, alright? Now, I usually watch YouTube videos when I edit, and when I edit, I usually put an hour-long video, just have some yap in the background while I edit. And the video that I put on was NC Hammer's video responding to this guy named DygoKnight, who made a video about Naruto retcons. Now, I watch a lot of NC Hammer because he has a lot of long videos, so I usually put him on as some yap in the background while I edit a video about Naruto, talking more about Naruto, maybe to find some extra jokes I can put in a video that maybe some I don't remember. You know, maybe I could just find a little bit of inspiration, talk more about Naruto in this light and that light, remind me of a fight or two that I could talk about later. But the video that he put out responding to DygoKnight basically broke down DygoKnight's arguments against Naruto retcons, which is what his video is about. Naruto retcons. In the initial video, wasn't that good. I didn't like it. But you know what? This is my first impression of the DygoKnight guy. I didn't want it to be too negative. So I watched his response, and maybe I thought that he would bring some better arguments to the table. And I didn't want him to be perfect. He didn't have to go 100 for 100. He didn't have to go 10 for 10, 100% from the field. But I at least wanted him to shoot from 50%. And what he shot instead was 0%. And I hated the entire video. Now, before I dive deep into this, I want to say that don't spread any hate towards DygoKnight. I don't hate the guy. I just hate the video. Alright, this has nothing to do with him personally. This has nothing to do with his channel. This has nothing to do with DygoKnight the person, DygoKnight the YouTuber. This simply has something to do with DygoKnight and his opinions on Naruto retcons. Alright, you got it? You get it? Good. I'm going to break this down into 3 separate arguments that he made. And just so you know, this video is scripted, so I started yapping about one segment longer than the other. I apologize. But the first thing I want to go over, and this one got me a little tight. It's the argument that he makes very consistently that just because something isn't explained doesn't make it a retcon.
Maybe he's going to ask, well, what about the other tail beasts? I don't see why they wouldn't exchange that information. Now, from a story perspective, introducing the tail beast concept here may be a little bit bloated. The thing is, this scene between Jiraiya and Kakashi implants the idea that the 9 tails, and even the 1 tail by extension, are just weird, quirky chakra creatures in the Naruto world, and that's it. We learn later on that they are connected in this family of tail beasts, and honestly, if this had always been the case, then the idea should have been signaled here. And as we've seen in the definition for contradiction, ideas definitely count. So the idea Kishimoto gives to the audience here is contradicted by new ideas and concepts introduced in Naruto Shippuden, constituting a retcon in the Naruto series.
So basically in this argument, this line of thinking, he believes that if you think something about the story of Naruto, or you believe something about the story of Naruto, then you should be able to call something that goes against that a retcon. And while I could explain why that is very stupid, in a very stupid way of thinking, a very stupid logic line, I'm going to show you examples real quick before I do that. Now, once again, I want to say, this has nothing to do with him personally. If I throw an insult in there, I apologize. But again, this is a stupid line of thinking because that's not how you constitute a retcon. A retcon is something that directly goes against something stated in the story, not something that you believe. Naruto and Hinata ending up together in the end of the show, in the end of the manga, does not make it a retcon. If that was a retcon, then they would obviously establish that the end game would be somebody else. The story of Naruto never went that, oh, maybe Sakura would actually start liking Naruto or somebody else would be Naruto's love. No. The story was always Hinata liked Naruto, and that's where it was. Nobody else, nobody showed any sign of attractiveness to Naruto outside of fillers. So you can't sit up here and say that Naruto and Hinata was a retcon, because at the end of the day, that might have been the goal from Kishimoto from day one, but the problem was he couldn't find, the time to put it in there correctly, because he's writing over hundreds of chapters of a manga that he has to keep interesting consistently until the end. So maybe he just forgot that, and he couldn't put that into the manga, into the show. He couldn't find a spot to put it in. That is not a retcon though, and that is the big part of the argument is that, well, Kishimoto didn't write it down in word in that this would happen at the end of the series, therefore that is a retcon. That is not how a retcon works. That is never how a retcon has ever worked. Because guess what? When did Naruto start? The Naruto manga started on September 21st, 1999. The manga ended on November 10th, 2014. Just to give you a little bit of a showing, right? I want to give you a slight explanation to how long that is. in 1999. I wasn't even a conceived thought. My mother had just finished college back in 1999. And fast forward 2014, I was then 8 years old. 15 years of writing a manga. I don't think that in 15 years of writing anything, I'm going to keep everything 100% consistent. One of the points that DygoKnight LARPs on very heavily is that the power level of Hashirama and Minato was not established in part 1.
He doesn't say that. He talks about how he doesn't want to fight against Hashirama or Tobirama because they're powerful. He talks about Hashirama's deep forest emergence and the threat that it brings. But he never says, oh, this is as powerful as the deep forest emergence as I saw Hashirama use while he was still alive. And it's been established multiple times that the Hashirama and Tobirama that were brought back to fight against Hiruzen were not at their peak power. One, it gets established in the 4th grade Shinobi.
That is established later on to justify why they were so much weak in the Orochimaru fight, constituting a retcon.
It's something that directly goes against something stated in the story.
In part 1, Hashirama and Minato were both just strong Kages. That's it. It wasn't really, Hashirama wasn't the god of Hokages or god of ninja or whatever he became. He was just, another one of the past Hokages who was strong as hell, just like all the Hokages. That's what Hokages were described to be, strong as hell. That's what they were established to be. They were established to be strong. That's all we knew in part 1. In part 1, we didn't know anything that separated them. We didn't know anything that diverged. All we knew was that they were strong. So then when we get into Shippuden, and we start diving deeper into backstories, and we start getting that separation that begins from Hashirama and Tobirama and Minato and Lord Third, then that's when it starts to make sense. We start separating them. But that's not a retcon that we started separating them past that, because at the same time, the story is from the point of view of Naruto in part 1 and then spreads out in Shippuden. We are looking through the world through the lens of Naruto, and in part 1, all Naruto knew was Hokage equals strong. We knew they were all strong. And another thing DygoKnight goes into is Hashirama and Tobirama versus Lord Third when they were reincarnated by Orochimaru. And he was like, well, in part 1, it seemed to be established that they were at their peak, but Lord Third seemed to be more scared of Minato and such and blah, blah, blah. Okay, to be fair to DygoKnight, technically he's got a point. He was more scared of Lord Fourth coming out, and it seemed like it if you really wanted to look at it that way. But at the same time, these are reincarnations. They are not as strong as they're going to be at their peak. And that is explained later into the story. That is not a retcon. That is an explanation. It is never established. It is never said directly that these are Hashirama and Tobirama at their peak. Because obviously if it was, Lord Third would have seen the Wu much faster, much more violently, and we probably wouldn't have a series because Orochimaru is now walking around with 2 Kages in his back pocket. So obviously, this isn't them at their peak. You're just supposed to infer that. You're not supposed to infer the opposite, because if you did, then you would be like, well, damn, the Hokages are kind of weak, or Lord Third is just that strong because he took out 2 former Kages. But that's not the truth. The truth is, again, this is them at their peak. Another thing that could have explained this away is that by the time Minato is coming out, the other 2 were already there. So he could just be expressing his fear towards the sheer numbers of the fact that he's going against 3 Hokage. No matter what the strength is, 3 Hokage. He has to fight 3 niggas at his strength. That's not, I wouldn't want to do that either. I don't care who it is. All right, I'm 18 years old. I don't care if I fight one 14-year-old or another 14-year-old. But if a third 14-year-old comes out, there might be a little bit more of an issue than if it was 2 14-year-olds. Because I don't got 3 arms. But beyond that, another point that he attempts to make, another general point that he tries to make, is that if something is established, once again, it kind of goes with the last point, but it's still, if something isn't established, then it's a retcon. And this is one of the points I remember from the video, right now when I'm recording it, because again, I'm not recording with a script. One of the points that he brought up was that the Chidori and Tamari's wind style was not called wind style or lightning style back then.
And then there are some retcons that kind of change how the series operates in terms of its power system. For example, do you remember that the Chidori wasn't even a lightning style jutsu in Naruto Part 1? Nor was Temari's wind style jutsu. She never says wind style, fan blowing thing. Never. That's because in the beginning, the Naruto power system wasn't completely based on the 5 element transformations and yin and yang release as well. It was supposed to be something far more varied.
When is it ever established that it was supposed to be more varied than the 5 elements in yin and yang? Yes.
When Orochimaru seals the 9 tails with a 5-pronged seal, we see some very strange quote-unquote elements on his seals, like on his finger. Call me crazy, but I get the feeling the power system initially had way more to do with that. Like the Chidori, for example, which I was talking about there, was said to be a chakra discharge that was created by the speed of the character. When you go so fast, the chakra becomes visible and you're able to strike with extreme precision. It just so happened to look like lightning.
Correct. But at the same time, that doesn't mean it's not that. Temari to wave her fan, her humongous fan, doesn't have to say wind style fan thing. I just feel like that would have been a little repetitive, especially because she has a weapon. You don't say kunai when they throw a kunai. They don't say ninja stars when they throw a ninja star. It's very clearly a weapon. It is a weapon. So if it's a weapon, she doesn't have to say what the style is. That's been established. A weapon doesn't have to be, you don't have to say the weapon's name to use the weapon. Now, the Chidori, on the other hand, while it wasn't called lightning style, it ended up being a lightning style. It looked like lightning, so I don't understand what the point of contempt here is. It ended up being called what it is. We got to the point at the end, all right? So we're good. I don't understand why we're mad about, oh, it's not called a lightning style back then. It's called a condensing of chakra. But the easiest way to explain it is, oh, it's a condensing of chakra that turns into lightning. You know, it's that simple. That's all that, and that's not a retcon. That's not a retcon. That's a further explanation. That's a furthering of the story. That's an adjustment. And nothing that DygoKnight tries to say, and this is the third point, and this is the one that really grinded my gears, and he successfully rage baited me on this one. He kept saying, oh, there's nothing wrong with a retcon. Retcons are good sometimes. Retcons are cool.
Oh, none of those are retcons. All right, the biggest possible retcon in the Naruto universe exists between Naruto Shippuden and Boruto.
Not canon, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, hi, editing printer here. One more thing I wanted to point out, right? This guy hates Boruto for some reason. It's not canon, and that's the one that is literally what he just said. I have no idea why he hates Boruto so much. I have no idea where this came from. I do think it's a little immature to hate Boruto this much to the point where you're like, oh, it's just not canon. Oh, it didn't happen. Do your own thing, dude. But to ignore the entirety of a sequel series simply because you don't like the way the main series ended, again, it's just kind of immature. But, you know, whatever. Teach their own.
The way I go about analyzing these retcons, talking about them, is just to have fun, to analyze the story, the ins and outs of how Kishimoto writes the characters and the plot and everything. Dissecting the story from an out-of-universe perspective, trying to figure out what was going on as Kishimoto wrote the story. What was he thinking? What was he trying to accomplish with this or that? What is this retcon bringing to the story? What is this retcon affecting in the story? How is it good or bad? And sometimes it doesn't have to be something completely spilled out. Naruto was never said not to be a reincarnation, and there isn't anything stopping him from being that in the beginning of the series, but the vibe you get from the story, everything. And the same thing goes for the Otsutsuki clan and the alien god thing. Nothing in the story ever indicates that the story is going to end up being about a fight against an alien goddess that comes to Earth, eats an apple, tries to cast Infinite Tsukuyomi, gets killed by her children, comes back. No. When ideas are contradicted, as we've seen in the definition, that can also constitute a retcon and a contradiction.
Retcon doesn't mean plot hole. I'm sorry. I gotta disagree with it. First of all, retcons are always seen as a negative thing. I have never seen somebody go, oh, this retcon was such a good thing. Because people usually don't like retcons because they insult their intelligence. Retcons usually say, oh, but you said one thing when I watched the show back in season 1, and now you're saying a completely different thing in season 8. People don't like retcons because they believe that they insult their intelligence. So yes, when you say retcon, that is a negative thing. And the problem is, most of these aren't even retcons. Again, they're adjustments. They didn't change anything. They didn't ignore something pre-established. They simply expanded on something that was pre-established to make it fit into where it was right now. They didn't just straight up switch A and B. They just morphed A into a different spot, if that kind of makes sense. They didn't just straight up change it. Kishimoto, again, he started this in 1999. He ended it in 2014. Some things were going to morph and change. Some things wouldn't, align perfectly. But for the most part, and I give this to Naruto, it does that pretty well. It doesn't throw things away. It kind of naturally morphs into what it became into the end. It kind of eased us into it because, again, people say, oh, Naruto was better when it was just jutsus and throwing kunai and hand signs. And, I'm saying it was cool with that. But at the same time, the story did expand and it became bigger. And also because, again, Naruto was meant to grow. He was meant to become better. It couldn't just be the simple show that it was forever. At some point it had to grow and expand the power levels and the powers. And I feel like it did that transition good enough without just throwing a straight middle finger to what was already established. Personally, I think if you wanted the more down-to-earth, kunai and hand signs, I feel like that's what Boruto should have been. But that's a completely different video. Also, DygoKnight hates Boruto for some reason and calls it not canon. I don't know why he hates it so much. It's not that bad. But I mean, when you see everything at the end of Naruto as one big retcon, I'd see why you'd hate it. Again, the ending of Naruto isn't perfect. NC Hammer already said this. I don't have to say it again, but I'll say it anyway. Naruto is not a perfect anime. Naruto was not written perfectly. Naruto didn't do a perfect job establishing everything that it was going to put in the ending. But again, there's a 15-year gap between that. And the way that it handled moving over to the new ending that it wanted and adjusting to it was great. You can't deny that. It wasn't a good ending, but for what they wanted to adjust to, it didn't just smack you in the face like a ton of bricks. Or they didn't just straight up insult your intelligence by saying, oh, this is the thing now. Again, a retcon in a way that's, more simpler to explain, it's just a straight up lie. A retcon is basically saying, oh, I might have said this, but this is actually true. That's a retcon. Most of what Naruto does is, I thought this was true, but this is true. This could be true, but nah, this is true. It doesn't really just flat out say anything in the beginning that is destroyed at the end of the show. Even the whole Neji was right, Naruto was wrong, Destiny's thing, and that Naruto didn't have to work hard. Naruto still worked hard. And most of the people that argue Naruto didn't work hard, they talk about Kurama and the Nine Tails, which is in the writing since the beginning. So that's not a retcon, if anything. Kurama has been inside of Naruto since the very beginning. So you can't call that a retcon that Naruto is a quote-unquote hypocrite when once again Kurama was inside of Naruto since day one of the writing. So after this video, this long video that's probably coming out on a Wednesday or Tuesday maybe, what is the goal here? The goal is just to have conversation about Naruto. Again, I don't want you to spread any hate to DygoKnight. My fault, bro. DygoKnight. I don't want you to spread any hate to him. All right, he's got his own thing going on over there. He's probably not gonna respond to this video because again, he said he doesn't like to punch down. And if there's anything to punch down, I might be the closest thing to punching down he could be doing. Although I don't mind. I'm already, trust me, I've been a part of sides of the internet that love punching down. So again, I wouldn't mind if DygoKnight responded to this video. Even though it'd be more making the same arguments he made against NC Hammer, which I don't believe NC Hammer would be responding to DygoKnight's video, because then that would just be the infinite money glitch. And I'm sorry, YouTube, but could you scoot over and make room for one more person? Y'all are gonna do that. If y'all gonna do this big, this two-way back and forth, can you bring one person in and let's make it a circle jerk? Respectfully, of course. But anyways, that's gonna do for the video. I promise you, the Naruto hot takes video is the next video. I'm getting to it. I promise. But anyways, this is Printer14, and I'm signing out.
Girl, what do you want from me? Yeah.